a single line. Didn't sleep well. Strange sounds at night, never coming back. She'd seen someone standing near the dock. A tall figure, barely visible, just watching the cabin. Then I found the paper. My stomach dropped the second I saw it, because I knew it hadn't been there when I carried the basket in. It said, "Don't stay past closing." And a single pair of bare feet appeared. The toes were pale, nails dark, and Cassie gasped. A figure moved past the door into the corridor. Hey, hello. If this is your first time here, welcome to ASMRk with the K. I hope you're doing well. If you have watched one of my videos before, thank you and welcome back. Today we have more scary stories from Reddit. We'll get straight to the first one. I hope you enjoy. When I was 16, my parents decided we needed a family trip. They rented a cabin out at Stillwater Lake, a place about an hour north of where we lived. It wasn't the kind of resort-style cabin people book for vacations now. This was older, tucked back in the woods, and pretty isolated. I remember the drive out there. My mum was excited, talking about how good it would be to spend time unplugged. My dad had that tight jaw he always got when he wasn't sure if something was a good idea. My younger sister Claire had her earbuds in the whole way, staring out the window. When we pulled up, the cabin looked normal enough. Weathered siding, a screened-in porch, a dock leading out into the lake. But the longer I looked, the less inviting it felt. The paint was peeling around the window frames, and the porch sagged just slightly in the middle. The strangest part was the guest book we found inside on the kitchen counter. It was a leather-bound thing with a pen tied to it with a fraying ribbon. At first, I thought it was quaint, until I saw that most of the entries weren't about vision trips or happy memories. They were short, clipped. Some were nothing more than a single line. Didn't sleep well. Strange sounds at night. Never coming back. My mum laughed it off, saying people probably thought it was funny to scare the next renters. My dad closed the book and put it in a drawer, but I couldn't shake it. That night, the four of us sat around the fireplace. There was no TV, no cell service, just us and the dark pressing in through the windows. I woke up sometime around 2 in the morning. At first, I thought it was because I wasn't used to the silence, but then I realised it wasn't silent at all. There was a sound coming from outside, not footsteps, not an animal. It was low, drawn out, almost like someone clearing their throat, except it didn't stop. Just dragged on in this awful way, a gravely hum that rose and fell. I sat up in bed, staring at the thin curtains over my window. The sound moved. It was slow, all the way around the side of the cabin, gravel crunching underfoot. The next morning, I mentioned it at breakfast. My mum said it was probably a loon, birds making strange noises at night. My dad just kept his eye on his coffee, not saying a word. Later that day, Claire pulled me aside. She said she'd woken up too. She hadn't heard the sound, but she'd seen someone standing near the dock. A tall figure, barely visible, just watching the cabin. She thought it was a dream, but when she blinked, decided not to tell our parents. On the second night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about what Claire saw. Around midnight, I heard the creak of a drawer opening downstairs. I figured my dad was getting a snack, until I remembered where the sound had come from. It was the kitchen drawer, the same one where he'd stashed the guest book. I crept down the stairs and froze halfway. The book was sitting on top of the counter, even though nobody was there. I swear on my life, the pen tied to it was moving. Not fast, not scribbling, but dragging slowly, as though someone invisible was pressing it across the page. The words it formed were shaky but clear. Stay a third night. I didn't wake anyone. I went back upstairs, heart racing, and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling until dawn. The next day, I checked the book again. The words were still there. Claire swore she hadn't touched it, and when I asked my dad, he snapped at me to drop it. My mum tried to brush it off again, but her face was pale. That evening, just before sunset, I found Claire standing at the edge of the dock. She was crying quietly, her arms wrapped around herself. When I asked what was wrong, she said she'd heard someone calling her name out in the woods. A man's voice, not loud, not frantic. Like he already knew she would follow. On our third night, the air inside the cabin felt charged, like a storm building, even though the sky outside was clear. We all went to bed early. Nobody said it, but I think we all wanted morning to come fast. Sometime past midnight, I woke up to the sound of water. Not the lake, water dripping inside the cabin. I sat up and realised it was coming from the corner of my room. A dark patch was spreading down the wall, like water was seeping through the wood. But when I touched it, my fingers came away dry. Then I heard the voice, not outside this time, inside. A whisper, right against my ear. You stayed. I ran downstairs, only to find the front door wide open. My dad was standing there in his boxers, staring out at the trees. My mum was behind him, clutching his arm. Claire was nowhere to be seen. We found her about 10 minutes later, walking barefoot toward the dock. Her eyes were half open, her lips moving like she was answering someone we couldn't hear. It took all three of us to pull her back inside. She fought like she wasn't herself, her voice cracking as she repeated, I have to go, I have to go, I have to go. At dawn, we packed the cab and left without breakfast. Nobody spoke the whole drive back. To this day, we don't talk about it. My parents refuse to, and Claire says she doesn't remember much beyond that voice in the woods. I lived in a small town for about 5 years, the kind of place where the strip mall was also the social hub. There wasn't much open late besides a 24-hour gas station and Sheridan Laundromat. It became part of my routine. Thursday nights around 10, I'd load my clothes into the back of my car and drive the 10 minutes into town and get it all done before midnight. It was cheaper that way, no line of people, no waiting for machines, just me, a couple of buzzing lights, and the hum of dryers. There's a comfort in routine, the smell of detergent, the rhythm of folding, even the vending machine that spat out stale snacks. I'd take my book or sometimes just sit on the cracked plastic chairs, zoning out to the whir of spin cycles. For months, nothing unusual ever happened. The laundromat was just a laundromat. Then one night, when the streets outside were wet from a recent rain and the air smelled like asphalt, something shifted, something small at first. When I pushed the glass door open, I noticed that only half the lights were on. Usually, the place was bright and ugly, the kind of lighting that made you notice stains on your own shirt. That night, it was dimmer, like every other fixture had burned out at once. I just chalked it up to maintenance. A laundromat that old always had problems. I picked a machine near the back wall, loaded my clothes, and settled in. The building was empty, or at least I thought it was. I didn't notice him at first. I was bent over a laundry basket, pouring detergent, when I caught movement in the reflection of the glass door. A figure sitting at the row of machines across from me. He was in one of the moulded plastic chairs, hunched a little forward, like he was waiting for something. What struck me wasn't his posture, but the fact that I hadn't heard him come in. Those doors squeaked every time, loud enough that you could hear it over the dryers. I nodded, gave that polite little smile you give strangers in quiet places. He didn't respond. He wasn't even looking at me. His gaze was locked on one of the dryers, though it wasn't running. After a few minutes, I realised he hadn't moved at all. Not a shift of weight, not even a blink that I could catch. He was just sitting, staring, like he was waiting for it to spin. Something about it made my throat go dry. I told myself he was probably tired, maybe even asleep with his eyes open, though I'd never actually seen someone hold themselves like that. About 20 minutes passed. I folded shirts, checked my phone, tried to act normal. And when I glanced up again, the chair was empty. I hadn't heard him leave. The door hadn't opened, the machines hummed, the lights buzzed, and the chair was just empty. I almost convinced myself it was in my head. Then I found the paper. It was tucked into the crease of my laundry basket, folded so neatly it looked intentional. My stomach dropped the second I saw it, because I knew it hadn't been there when I carried the basket in. The handwriting was small. It said, "Don't stay past closing." I stared at it, and then I laughed nervously. Sheridan's was 24 hours. There was no closing. I considered leaving right then, but something in me, stubbornness, or just that need to finish the damn laundry, kept me planted. I shoved the paper into my pocket and loaded my clothes into the dryer. That's when I noticed him again. He was standing this time by the row of unused machines near the far wall. Too far for me to make out details, but close enough that I saw his head tilt ever so slightly, like he was still staring at me through the shadows. I forced myself not to look. I folded, pretended, tried to hold the routine together. But when I glanced again, he was gone. Only the chair where he'd first been sitting was turned now, angled just slightly toward my dryer. By the time my clothes were almost dry, I'd already decided I was leaving as soon as the cycle ended. My nerves were shredded, every sound amplified, the clink of zippers in the drum, the low whine of the vending machine, even the faint creak of the ceiling. I kept telling myself it was just me, alone in a rundown laundromat, that was all. Then I heard it. The sound of another dryer door slamming shut, loud and heavy, from the far side of the room. I froze. None of the other machines had been running. No one else was supposed to be there. When I finally forced myself to look, I saw the man again, crouched low, like he'd just finished loading something into the dryer. Only this time, his head turned slowly toward me, and I swear his mouth was moving, though no sound came out. I grabbed my half-dry clothes, shoved them into the basket, and got out of there. The glass door squeaked as I shoved it open, and the cool night air hit me like a shock. I didn't look back until I reached my car. The laundromat windows were mostly dark with the glare, but I could still make out the rows of machines. Every single dryer was spinning. I never went back. I started driving to another laundromat 3 towns over, adding an extra 30 minutes to my errands just to avoid Sheridan's. Sometimes though, when I'm folding clothes late at night, I still find slips of paper tucked into the fabric. Always the same handwriting, always the same warning. Don't stay past the closing. We were amateurs, proud of it even. The town theatre was a tired old place, with threadbare seats and a lobby that smelled faintly of popcorn and floor polish. Most of us worked day jobs, teachers, barristers, even a mechanic. The theatre was where we made the rest of our lives tolerable. I'd been doing tech work there for 3 years. Lights, sound cues, and whatever £40 prop the stage manager didn't want to lift herself. That spring, we put on a play that required a lot of hands. 5 acts, a rotating set, quick costume changes. Rehearsals had been intense but fun. The kind of camaraderie that turns strangers into something like family. There were long nights after work, folding costumes, marking measurements on damp stage floors, and telling the same jokes until they were a kind of glue. The voice first appeared as background noise. Not in the rehearsal hall, no one heard it there, but in the odd, quiet moments before tech checks, during the lull after we'd broken down the stage and the others had gone home. It was a whisper you could blame on exhaustion or the AC. I remember standing in the dim backstage corridor, hands on the wooden rail they used for lowering curtains, thinking the building itself was settling and then going home. Opening night was supposed to be adrenaline and champagne and relief. The house filled with neighbours and parents. The lights burned hot. Lines that had once stumbled came clean. The audience laughed in the right places and took their breath away in others. Backstage we whooped and grabbed each other's shoulders like survivors. The next morning the rehearsal hall smelled of coffee and the velvet dust you only notice when the air is still. I was loading a crate of props into the storage room when I felt the hair on the back of my neck tingle. I stopped and listened. The building was empty, quiet enough that a dropped earring would sound like a dropped pan. Then, very close, I heard it, a voice saying my name. It wasn't shouted, it was low, close, like someone reading from a crib sheet right behind my ear. Sam. the sound of a familiar name, but it felt different. It felt deliberate. I told myself not to mention it. After years of being in the theatre, you learn to file away little strangenesses. The unmatched glove, the footlight that burns a little longer, the prop that mysteriously ends up on stage when no one has touched it. They're quirks you laugh about. But for the rest of that week, that voice followed me in smaller ways. A whisper before a cue, a name in the tape of the headset when we were testing mics at midnight, always fleeting enough to be dismissed. 2 weeks into rehearsals, the voice turned into notes. By then, we were used to the shape of the play. Bodies moved through the cramped wings with the practiced efficiency of a kitchen at diner service. I handled lights, Maya did sound, Thomas booked the front of house ticket stubs. We all had jobs. But props were everybody's responsibility. Anyone could find anything in a crisis. That habit made some of us sloppy. You'd leave a hand mirror in a prop tray, and it would be someone else's job to call it out. The first note was on my desk in the booth when I arrived for a Saturday morning run-through. I drink terrible tea from a chipped mug, and I keep a notepad with cue times and scribbles about gels. On the corner of the pad, someone had written in neat block letters, "Don't leave." I laughed aloud, half to myself, half to break whatever strain was building. It was a practical joke, surely. Someone trying to rile the tech guy. The thing was, the handwriting didn't match anyone's I knew. Not Cassie, the stage manager. Her script looked like a chicken attacked it. Not Jared, whose script was a mess of underlined stage directions and coffee stains. This was neat, measured, and there were no fingerprints. I shoved the note into a drawer and told myself, okay, play along. Then I saw it again. Another slip of paper tucked under a gel pack labelled Blue 2. This one said, "Stay." Suddenly, the theatre felt cold. You can rationalise the eerie into rehearsal energy. Too many people in a small place, everyone tired. But the notes weren't like every other prank. They implied knowledge that someone knew when I was coming, where I would go, and what I would do. That night after tech, we discovered the props for Act 3 had been removed. Not far, just a wrong vase shape, a wrong picture on the mantel, but wrong enough. We rearranged them, laughed it off as mishandled boxes. Later, Maya swore she'd seen someone sitting in the auditorium, just a silhouette in the dark, yet no one was there when she checked. Thomas chalked it up to time of night paranoia. Then Cassie found a note pinned to the inside of the curtain. "We watch." She folded it into her pocket and kept it quiet. But the air backstage changed. Small things stopped being small. The headset buzzed with static more often, and sometimes carried, so faint you could dismiss it, little bricked syllables that weren't in the script. We started checking each other's car trunks when leaving late at night. We started locking the exterior doors twice. I told myself that I was just being dramatic. It's easy to say you're spooked by a theatre. It's an old, liminal place, built on breath and memory. It's built for illusions. Who living or breathing was going to believe that paper notes and half-heard syllables could add up to something first real confrontation was small and mundane, but it broke something in us. We were doing a full dress rehearsal with seats filled by volunteers, simulating an open night crowd. The house lights were down, cues approached, and the audience was quiet in that waiting hush you get before the first line. Midway through the second act, in a scene where my character sits at a kitchen table and reads a letter aloud, the prop mailbox slipped open on its own. Not conveniently, like falling because of a weak staple. It slid off its own accord, soft metal scraping on wood, and a folded slip of paper slid out and landed on my lap. No one could move. The stage was a living thing. It hummed with the electricity of 40 people expecting fiction. I unfolded the paper with trembling hands. It read in familiar, measured letters. Act 2. Stay. He doesn't like arrivals. For a moment, I thought it was a new bit, an in-situ joke from our director to heighten realism. She didn't laugh. She looked as terrified as I felt. Someone called for lights, and we went through the scene on autopilot, but the words had inserted themselves into the play, and the crowd's laughter when it came felt thin and wrong. After the rehearsal, we all looked at each other like animals that had seen too much of the moon. We ended up installing cameras in the wings and set them to record every night of rehearsal. When I reviewed the footage the next day, because you review everything to prove the building wrong, there was nothing. The footage showed me sitting at the table alone, the stage empty, except for a shadow in the corner that didn't belong to any of the techs or actors on the schedule. It moved like oil under glass, just a smear of darkness. And then, when I zoomed in, it was gone. On the fourth night, something else happened. The actor who played the antagonist, a big, blustering man who never took himself too seriously, started losing pages from his script. We found them, folded and placed on the floor by his prop trunk between acts. Each page had, at the bottom, a single word in neat block letters. Alone. He went home early that night, pale under his moustache. He messaged the company chat that he'd take a break for a while. The next morning, he didn't come in at all. Us veterans tried to be reasonable. We suggested daylight rehearsals, and we logged every entry with a clipboard. But escalation doesn't need your permission, does not negotiate. Opening week was a nightmare gilded with tradition. People bought tickets. Little kids in the front row whispered loudly. We performed. The audience cheered. We took bows. The mayor posted a photo. Everything external looked normal. Backstage, in the humid underbelly of the theatre, where cables crossed like veins under the skin, something had shifted. Cassie sat in the darkness of the stage manager's booth and tapped her pencil so quietly it sounded like a metronome in a tomb. We were due to go on for curtain call when the follow-through noise on the headsets turned into a scrap of voice I could make out. Don't leave, not yet. The door to the dressing room creaked, not from wind, no drafts. It swung open a crack and a single pair of bare feet appeared. The toes were pale, nails dark, and Cassie gasped. A figure moved past the door and into the corridor. Not an actor, not a stagehand we knew. It walked with slow, ceremonial slowness of someone on cue. When it stopped, it faced the mirror in the makeup room. If smallest breath. This figure didn't follow its reflection. Instead, when it turned its face toward the mirror, his features didn't align. They lagged, like a soundtrack behind the film. No one screamed. I remember how strange that was. We were so trained to perform under pressure that the first reaction is often to move instead of to scream. But when I ducked into the corridor, the figure was there, leaning against the wall with hands folded neatly and a smile that was not for any mouth I'd known. It said softly, "You leave. You always leave." I don't remember what I did exactly. I remember the roar of the house and the cool pull of the curtain as it swallowed us. We finished the call, we smiled, we bowed, and later, when the crowd had left and the marquee light blinked in the rain, we packed away the costumes. Our laughter was too loud and brittle. It followed two of us home that night, not physically in our cars, but as dread that sat on our shoulders like a hood. I had the after image of its face in the bathroom mirror for days, not because it stood behind me, but because a small smudge of something like the shape of a mouth appeared in the fog whenever the mirror was steamed. The smudge was in the same spot and it never moved. We considered quitting, considered calling someone, anyone, a priest, a cop, an older woman from the church with a casserole dish of remedies. The sensible option was to walk away, to sell the set, to let the old theatre sit empty until nature took care of it. But theatre people are stubborn and practical. We took down the cameras, we replaced the curtains, we painted over the spots where the notes had been stuck. We tried to make the ordinary cover the wrong thing. Still, sometimes on a late night when the city is wet and the rehearsal hall is empty, the old building remembers its audience. The voices come back in the hum of the dimmed house lights. When I walk past the stage door, I feel something watching like a promise. If you ever find yourself in a small theatre and a single seat in the balcony seems too cold, listen for the cue that never comes. If a note appears in your script, fold it, throw it away. And if a pair of bare feet shows in the dressing room doorway, do not follow them into the corridor. We learned that leaving all at once doesn't fix anything. It only delays the next arrival. The theatre waits longer than people do. It remembers more clearly. It keeps its visitors. So that is the last story for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you as always for watching, and please do consider subscribing to the channel. There are 2 new videos uploaded every week. Until next time, take care.